Show what your name is. Do you have a man who you came with?
All right. Welcome back, y'all. Street Academy Podcast, where we keep one foot in the academy and one foot in the street. We back and we back and we back. My guys with
we
me
got the choir.
Oh, wow.
Amber got something in the back. She got her stuffed animal in the background. I want mine. Jackie, like, wait a minute.
It's the only thing I got in the background. My bonnet.
Your bonnet. Throw the bonnet on.
That
Throw the
is so
bonnet on,
black.
let the
It's
people
awesome. I love that. That's the blackest thing right there. It's like, I got my bonnet.
This is
She's
all I
definitely
have
the
for
blackest.
y'all.
Yeah.
This is what I got.
Because I saw Amber's minion. I was like, oh, my daughter slept in my room last night. So she looked at her unicorn.
Aw.
Throw the unicorn out here.
Oh gosh.
But
It's
on
cute.
my ass, huh? What's up, y'all? Everybody good?
Yeah, we good. We doing great. And we are back for part 2 of the capitalism debate. We know we've left you waiting and you want to know, where does this land? And so it's going to land with just one question. So recap real quick. We already talked about, should Black people own as much as they can? Should Black people seek power? Do Black people need money? We've talked about all of those. John and Jackie have given you great thoughts about those. So please go check out the previous episode about those to see who won each round. But right now, this episode starts with them being even. They have both an even amount of points. So this is the tiebreaker. And you have to do this, answer this question in the context of Black capitalism, okay? Not from necessarily your own perspective, or it could be your own perspective, because that's the whole point of it, because that's what make it authentic. Anyway, it is to say, this is the last question that we want to hear you talk about with Black capitalism. And here we go. Black people should focus on building a legacy. And Black people will die trying to get rich.
Black people should focus on building a legacy, and Black people, you said, will die trying to get rich?
Black people will die trying to get rich. It is the question of legacy, because it's like, get rich or die trying. So if we think about Black people trying to build a legacy, Black people will die trying to get rich in the pursuit of building said legacy. What are your thoughts?
Oh, I mean, Dr. Hater.
Black people will die trying to get rich because they are trying to build a legacy. That's the better way of saying it. Black people will die trying to get rich because they are trying to build a legacy. Should Black people try to build a legacy?
Okay. Who got to go first?
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Who got to go first, Amber?
Let's do
I
that.
can't remember who went first in the last round.
Let's see. Let's do it solely based on guessing. What I'm thinking of a number between 1 and 10.
7.
What do you say?
Hey,
John?
5.
Jackie, you got it right, so you get to choose who goes first.
John, you want to go first or second?
You know I want to go second.
Go first.
I was gonna say the same thing, Amber, but I'm like, if she giving me the option.
You said you want to go second, so you go first.
Dang it, I should have said first. All right. So say it one more time.
Black people will die trying to get rich because they're trying to build a legacy. Should Black people try to build a legacy?
Okay. So I'm gonna just be authentic. There's a couple of things. I think a lot of it is based on interpretation. So I want to talk about my interpretation of that before I then go into my explanation. So a couple of things I want to say. First, I don't think that building a legacy solely has to do with getting rich. And I do believe that you can build a legacy without the pursuit of riches, right? I do believe that in many legacies, economic freedom or economic stability is a part of it. But
Mhm.
there are many people who did not have that and still built a legacy, i.e. Dr. King, i.e. Malcolm X,
Mm.
i.e. Harriet Tubman. I mean, so many people, right? When I think about a legacy, I think about being remembered. I think about something that you've done. And I guess what we should do is maybe look up the term legacy to talk about how we want to how what how we want to talk about it.
Legacy.
So
An amount
legacy,
of money or property left to someone in a will.
okay. An applicant to a particular college or university who is regarded preferentially because a parent or other relative attended the same institution.
Mm.
So denoting or relating to software. Okay, we're not talking about that part.
Yeah.
So, and this it says, what is the legacy of a person? Legacy is something that is passed on, but legacy can take many forms. A legacy may be of one's faith, ethics, and core values. A legacy may be monetary or your assets. A legacy may come from one's character, reputation, and the life you lead, setting an example for others and to guide their futures. So, I think in a capitalist society, legacy immediately goes to whatever you bequeathed, right?
Mhm.
Whatever you've given to your you know, to your progeny. But I think if we think larger, right, outside of a capitalist society, legacy is more than that,
We're
right?
not thinking larger. We're talking about Black capitalism.
So if we're so if well then if we want my perspective within a capitalist society, then I would agree. I would think that it can be helpful to pass on an economic legacy. I think that that is something that we all should strive for. I believe that that is something that we all should have access to, equal access to. Um, all races of people, all genders, all identities, because that helps our next generation be able to succeed and prosper and thrive in and outside of a capitalist society. I don't think that that is something that is unique to capitalism. I think even if you look at pre-capitalist society, mercantilism, you know, socialist ideas, all of these different things that in many ways preceded capitalism. I mean, even the Bible talks about how good it is for us to be able to leave wealth for our children, right? Like that's biblical. So I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. I think it is the way in which we pursue it and the discrepancies and the disproportionate ways in which some people are allowed to and have ease in doing that as opposed to other people. I think that's the problem. But I don't see an issue with wanting to leave a legacy. And then there's a part of what you said that Black people, what was it?
Will
Black
die.
people and being rich.
Black people will die trying to get rich. True or
Black people
false?
will die trying to get rich. I don't believe that. Number one, I don't believe that that's a phrase that should be applied to Black people as a whole. Because now, again, we talked about a little bit earlier. How do we define Black? Is it just African American? Is it African? You talking about super rich people? Like, is Jay-Z and Beyonce died trying to get rich? Who knows? 50 Cent already said he is, so that takes care of him. But you know what I'm saying? So to lump that into all Black people, no, I wouldn't do that with pretty much any phrase that has to do with the Black community. Are there some people who want to die trying to get rich or getting rich? Yes, there are, but I don't think that's something that can be applied to our full community / full nation. But I do believe that that is something that some people want. I don't think that that's I would not suggest that for people, Black people. I remember reading a quote by Warren Buffett, and he talks about how pursuing money and pursuing wealth is the worst way to live your life. And a lot of times the best way to live your life and the way in which you oftentimes will find yourself being economically stable or even having more money than you thought you would is by pursuing whatever it is that you love and that you're passionate about with all your heart. And so doing something that you love, living a life of value is doing something that you love. And so and that is probably from one of the kings of capitalism, if you will, or at least the person that has benefited from capitalism the most, at least in our lifetime. So I would not suggest pursuing things just for the sake of money. I've heard way too many people say that won't lead to the results that most people are looking for. But I don't think there's anything wrong with legacy or wanting to have that within balance of maintaining a good life, doing it for the right reasons, making sure that whatever it is that you are pursuing is within your passion, that is morally right. And most importantly, for Black people, that is going to uplift our community in a positive way.
Okay, so you've come to Black people should focus on building a legacy. True. Black people will die trying to get rich. False. Where do you stand, Jackie?
Oh man. So I had so much time to think, and I'm still like, oh, I could use another 20 minutes. So I think a couple of things, y'all know that I'm fresh off my Bell Hook Symposium that I went to yesterday. And I'm just, still ruminating on a couple of like things that I heard, particularly toward the end with the very brilliant Joy James and a couple of the things that she said as it relates to capitalism. And I think what I was left with was the need to divest from capitalism at every turn, like at every opportunity we get, from divesting from a capitalist mindset, meaning like our embrace of like the capitalist philosophies and sort of like aligning with them. We should certainly like take those opportunities to divest. So this might be a little bit of a roundabout answer, but there are two quotes that I like wrote down. And the first one was, "We're implicated in the terror we seek to escape." And so she was talking specifically about like the capitalist empire. And so, just like in thinking about like how we align with capitalism, when we think about the sheer terror that capitalism has visited upon us as Black bodies, like starting with us being capital, being fungible, being property, like the capitalist philosophies, like the underpinnings, like the foundational principles of capitalism have not divested from that. Like we as Black people are still seen as the pegs or the cogs in the capitalist machine, and like it keeps it going, and it keeps destroying Black communities, Black bodies. And so at the same time, like we're doing what we need to do to survive. We're implicated in the terror we seek to escape. And so I think that, John, you're right. Like in terms of legacy can be all those non-material things. And what does it mean for us to like focus? And that's like an Afrocentric value, right? Like, what does it mean for us to focus on character, leaving a people like strong and whole, as opposed to like hoarding wealth and hoarding resources? What does it mean to like shift for us to think about that as legacy, as opposed to just like a collection of material goods? And the second quote, she said, "The violence waged against us will not recede by our capacity to love." And, to paraphrase that a little, the violence waged against us will not recede by our capacity to leave material resources to our kids. And I think about, Serena Williams, as wealthy as she is, having to, advocate for herself in childbirth. Beyonce, as wealthy as she is, having to, almost dying in her, like in her childbirth, and like facing all sorts of like maternal health risks. Oprah, as wealthy as she is, being stopped in a store and being, told, sort of suggested that she can't afford to shop there. So even if folks have like uncountable wealth or uncountable resources, well, I guess we can count them, but like if they have amassed like a tremendous amount of material goods, the violence, the symbolic violence, the physical violence that's waged against us will not recede by that. And so if we know that to be true, what then does it mean? Like, how little does it mean if we focus on amassing material goods that ultimately implicate us in being complicit with this system, but also are foundational to the violence that we face every day?
Wow. So you're saying, so your answer to Black people should build a legacy is what? Legacy in the context of capitalism.
Yeah, I would say that no, that shouldn't be our focus. No.
So false.
Mm-hmm.
And then Black people will die trying to get rich. True or false?
Yeah, I think that any sort of economic pursuit, any sort of being complicit with like the economic system ultimately leads to our demise.
So true. So you all have opposite answers for this particular question. Aha! Say it. Do either of you have a direct response to the other?
I was just gonna say, I'm glad you asked those questions so directly at the end, Amber, because when I was listening, I was like, it sounds like we agree, but maybe I missed it because we clearly don't.
The Black people build a legacy in the context of capitalism. John, you say yes, it's helpful to have passing down economic wealth is important. Jackie says, actually, if that's the thing, we have to recognize that that's not the thing that's going to save us. So that is not as important.
Can I add?
Hold on.
You want to go, John?
Yeah, I was just gonna say. Now, I also want to keep in mind that the part that I agree with Jackie on is that while I think that that is important to leave a legacy, and again, there are so many philosophies outside of capitalism that predate capitalism that suggested that is an important thing, that is a key part of our that should be a key part of our purpose, as as human beings. Or one thing that is important for us to do is to try to ensure that we leave an economic legacy as well as other types of legacies for anybody coming after us. At the same time, I do agree with her that it should not be at the expense of the death of our people. It should not be at the expense of the immorality of our people. It should not be at the expense of the regression of our people. And so I think that there's a way that it can be done in ways where there's a balance. So I want to make sure that that is clear in what I'm saying. Not either or, but that there are ways in which we can be able to do it's a both and if there has to be a choice, then the choice has to be the progression, the the struggle, the the elevation of our people, if there has to be a choice over trying to just get money or just get rich for yourself or your kids.
I think what I have to say also like brings us a little bit closer, just in terms of I was talking to a colleague yesterday, and she was telling me that she was living in one particular neighborhood of Philly and then ended up moving to a different neighborhood because of the schools. And we just kind of started talking about how wild our decisions about our children, and specifically like our children, shape our lives. So much so that someone will uproot their whole life and where they are, and plop down in a whole different place as a risk that it will be better for their child in the end. And so I think that, you know, like that we have hundreds of years of evidence that are like being complicit with capitalism, like, you know, engaging with capitalism will ultimately not benefit us. We have like hundreds of years to suggest that. But I think in each generation, we still take those risks, like those capitalists, like, you know, complying with capitalist systems as a risk that maybe it'll work out for our kid. And I think that that's fair. Like the love that people have for their kids is like truly deep and understandable. And so it makes sense that, you know, like regardless of what we have to suggest otherwise, like there's so many Black parents that will take their kid and put their kid in an all white environment, like knowing white supremacy, knowing, you know, there are the risks that the child will be called the N-word, knowing that they will be mistreated, like knowing all these things. But the risk of having them in like this, you know, particular academic environment so that they could go to college, so that they can succeed, sort of outweighs that. You ask anyone, will I drop my child off in a dangerous environment and leave them there for 18 years? The answer is no. But when it comes to like this risk of, like, if I put them in this school, like that's a risk that I'm willing to take, as opposed to like dropping them off like some other dangerous context. Yeah, you know, I just think that our investment in capitalism is certainly like shaped by our desire to have the best for our kids, and maybe those things like come with our being willing to risk it, that it might work out.
Can I respond to that, Amber?
Mhm.
Or are we okay? So what I would like to know from Jackie is that if leaving a legacy for you know children, our future in general, is important. So you are saying that is important. I just want to make sure I'm
Not an economic one.
not
No.
an economic one. Okay. So what you're suggesting is that that is not important
What
to
I'm
to leave an
what
economic legacy.
what I'm suggesting is that within the framework of capitalism,
Mhm.
that economic legacy is not as helpful as we think. And
Mhm.
so the prioritization of creating one is something that we need to like not be invested in. So I guess like
Mhm.
yes to the answer. Yes to answer your question, but also like that's the context. It's not just a flat out like no, come up with your own
Okay, got
rationale.
you. Got you. Okay. So um then if so as long as capitalism exists, then Black folks should not, as long as capitalism exists, Black folks should not necessarily want to leave an economic legacy for their kids. The only time in which Black folks should leave an economic legacy for their kids is completely outside of any type of capitalist endeavors.
That would be ideal. But like as, you know, like an Afrocentric value, that wouldn't necessarily happen because we know traditionally like it's communal. It's not like I have mine, you have yours, and if you have more than me, then you know, congratulations to you. It's no like you have this, I have this, we have this collectively. There's no
Mhm.
child that is left without just because their parent was poor. Like
Mhm.
we're taking care of each other is like
Mhm.
this Afrocentric value.
Okay. Um, and so with this idea, because like you said, that's ideal,
Mhm,
but that's not necessarily practical right now,
mhm,
and maybe not for the foreseeable future.
mhm.
Um, and so with that not being practical right now, we should just Black folks should just don't worry about that right now. Don't worry about leaving no legacy. Don't worry about trying to save money for your kids. Don't worry about doing none of that, because any of those things, if you talk about saving money for your kids, soon as you put your money in the bank, that's capitalism. Whether you want it to be or
See,
not, it's
but
capitalism. As soon as you
when it
invest,
said
that's capitalism.
when it's said
So
like that, then I come off like a fool, right? Like that's not what I'm trying to imply. What ideally in the context that we're in, I would love for Black folks to ask themselves a series of questions. And the questions can start with, what is the purpose? What ultimately will this economic like cushion protect my child from? Will it protect my child from facing racism when I'm not here? I would say that the answer is no, but parents can ask themselves that. Will it prevent them from facing anti-Blackness? Probably not. Will it prevent them from, facing misogynoir? What will this protect them from? Well, the answer might be it protects them from living on the street. Like, will it? Like, we know that when it comes to Black communities, white people historically have been very good about taking Black communities, taking the literal homes in different ways from Black people. Like, what exactly is this wealth protecting them from? And then the second question is there a better or different way that can ensure what I'm hoping will happen, like insulating them from the things that they will face as a result of structural racism, structural anti-Blackness. And that's assuming that that's like what parents are hoping. Some parents are like, I just want my child to, stunt, ball out. Okay, well, that's your value. Like, just be honest about that. Like, I want my child to walk around, with the fur coat on at 2 years old and the Jordans. Okay, well, then maybe that's your value. And we could be honest about that. Like, and if that's what you want, then like do that, pursue that. Right. If your value is like, I want my child to be insulated from some like larger thing, then like work toward that instead.
And it's interesting you talk about that, because if one would want their child to be insulated from the racism in education, or not having to deal with police or that sort of thing, then my argument is that there has to be an economic backing for that, right? And we both have worked in predominantly Black schools, maybe predominantly Black private schools, where there is a much safer, right? They're not perfect, but they're much safer in terms of keeping our kids away from the anti-racism, allowing one thing that I know you have taught me when it comes to predominantly Black schools is it provides a certain cultural consciousness and cultural self or collective dependency on our people, and gives us a certain level of self-esteem individually when we're in these predominantly Black educational spaces. We also know that currently those spaces cost money. Those schools are not cheap. And so a lot of the students that benefit from these spaces are typically Black middle-class students whose parents have benefited to some degree, or to some degree have participated in capitalist endeavors. Now, it does not mean that their whole ideals are caught up in capitalist ideas to the extent that white people's are, but to some degree they have been able to benefit and participate in it for the sake of, now that I have gained what I can, let me be able to give my child something different, so that within their life, maybe they don't have to depend on it or participate in it as much. But they have the knowledge of the socialist ideas or Pan-African ideas that move us further and further away from capitalism, while still having that economic backing, so that they can, so that we can eventually, maybe in the future, move towards an idea where now we can create these spaces and we don't need their money. We don't need to participate in capitalism, because now we have our own economic society, our own economic system, to where we can now do that. But in order for that to be done, there has to be some kind of initial Right. We at least we understand. And then even, and I'm sorry, I just want to finish this one part. And then even to going back to being able to stay away from the anti-racism. Hold on, baby. The anti-racism within the police. Some people talk about, and we've talked about in the past, Black people being able to patrol their own communities or secure their own neighborhoods. And that's true, but that will also take money, right? That takes resources, that takes being able to pay that security, to pay the detail, to be able to do the things necessary for that to be done. So there is a kind of an economic importance for Black liberation that we need.
So then that's my question, right? Like, does that mean that the way that an economic legacy needs to be structured needs to come directly through that child? So, sticking with the schools, like for a moment, let's say, God forbid, that you pass away like today, right? And one of your concerns is that leaving your daughter in a place where she can, for the next 18 years or however many, be educated in a school that will affirm her identity, is the best way to do that, to leave $1 million in her bank account? Or is it to think about supporting a structure so that that can be in place for her, in terms of like her living in a community where she doesn't have to face police violence, like let's say at 18 or beyond, or let's say like 16, she is going to have her first car. Is it better to leave her $1 million in her bank account? Or is it better to like think about investing in the structures, the Black patrol systems, or whatever it might be that are the alternatives to policing, the mental health? Like, is it better to think about investing in those things rather than just leaving $1 million in her bank account? Because then it comes down to, if I'm going to leave $1 million for my child, then that sets up my child to be like the arbiter of what's good and what's not. Like, let's say that my child is like this philanthropist. That, I mean, to me, I'm like, I don't need anyone to arbitrate or whatever the word is, like my personal endeavors, right? Like, I don't need to go to Oprah for her to decide, well, if you need a house, you only need 50,000 versus 100,000 versus 200. Like, I don't need her to do that. Like, I'm capable, and like, I'm agentive enough to make those decisions on my own. But to set up somebody to like be making these sorts of decisions, I think that that's problematic in and of itself. So that's what I would say, like, be asking, like, why are we leaving this economic legacy? And are there alternatives that will better serve us in the long run?
And I agree with you. I think this idea of whether we should leave it to our individual children or whether we should participate or leave it to a structure that can help benefit our children, I think that's an important question. My thing is, in either way it goes, there's going to be some evidence of capitalism that's going to exist in both, at least from where we stand today. So you said, John, if you were to pass away today, how would you want that to be done? Whether I leave it to an institution, whether I leave it to Imhotep Academy, or whether I leave it to her specifically, either way it goes, if I leave it to her specifically into her account, there are certain evidence of capitalism that's going to allow for her to be able to make money off of that. Or even if I leave it to the institution, and the fact that they're a 501c3 and then they get these tax benefits, that is a capitalist policy, that is a capitalist tradition that I don't know if it precedes capitalism, but I've never heard of anything outside of that before capitalism, that there's evidence of that will allow it to continue to grow and develop. So whether it's an institutional deposit or whether it's a personal deposit, there's still capitalism either way. At least some level of evidence of it.
And I'm not saying that we ignore the fact that this is like the structure that we live in. Like, back to Joy's statement, let me not butcher it. We're implicated in the terror we seek to escape. Like, we live here, right? Like, so as much as we might try to avoid the structure, like, we live in it in the same way that we live in a place with like oxygen. Like, we can try to not breathe, but that's not, like, it's just, it is what it is. It's the structure that we live in. But that doesn't mean that we have to like be it doesn't mean that like we can't like we're agentive agent, like we're agentive people, like we have the power of choice. That doesn't mean that we have to be complicit with it at every level.
So where do we land, folks? I'm ready to give the conclusion. Are y'all ready?
Yes.
Let's do.
All right. So I'm going to give this one example. I don't know if you all have heard big news in the business world over the last week. The owner of Patagonia, that shoe, that like nature brand of clothes. Y'all seen Patagonia?
Yeah.
So now they put out a statement, the CEO put out a statement that Earth is now our only shareholder. So they have switched, they have reorganized their company so that 98% of their voting stock is now completely given to a nonprofit focused on climate change. The last 3% of the non-voting stock is basically like a trust that makes sure that it maintains the legacy. So basically what they have said is Earth is our only shareholder. If we keep, as a company, if we keep trying to make the shareholders happy, which are all of the people, and trying to make them more money, you'll end up risking making decisions that will impact the Earth. And so they're like, now the way they've set it up, Earth is the only shareholder. So they have completely reconfigured what it means for a business to have a legacy. It's not about the money shareholders at all. It's about Earth. Very interesting. So in other words, this is a radically different approach for businesses. So when it comes to businesses trying to be more sustainable and trying to show their commitment to being green, this company has is doing something radically different that is unprecedented. And so when we think about Black people and building a legacy, and as both of you all have talked about, it's in order for it to be really meaningful in some kind of way, it has to be radically different than what has been happening before, in some form, whether it's the way the legacy is passed down, or the like exactly what's happening. It has to be different, or it can't just be economic. It has to be all of these other things. And so because of that, what I have seen consistently in the way that you all have debated and giving your explanations of each of the categories of topics, whether it's Black people should own as much as they can, Black people need money, Black people need power, and lastly, Black people will die trying to get rich, or should Black people build a legacy? What I have noticed consistently is that you have had to reason outside of the frame of capitalism. Every time you have to employ Afrocentric ideals, and you recognize that each time you do that, like that enables you to expand how you're going to interact with capitalism. And that is to say that capitalism and Afrocentricity, or those Afrocentric values, or those Black values that we are coming to describe them as, they don't mesh. Because every single time we have to like try to figure out, no, it can't just be that. We got to see it broader. And for that reason, I will say that Black capitalism does not work, and capitalism doesn't win when it comes to Black people. So I can't necessarily say Jackie. I'm not sure if Jackie, you won all the way, or if John won all the way, because both of you consistently had to like explore it outside of capitalism. It just doesn't work in the way that we think. We're like, that was the first thing you said in this episode, John. You were like, well, I mean, are we talking about like, it like this? Or it's like, if we really try, we can't even possibly do that, because we are not sold on capitalism. And Blackness and capitalism are oil and water. That is the conclusion of the debate. Please talk about it amongst yourselves.
Well,
and we are done. We're done.
Dr. Hader is a formidable opponent. And so, yeah, man, that was very, very good. Very, very good arguments, very, very good points. And if I'm honest, I mean, again, because it was a debate, and so in capitalism, you trying to win, I was trying to win. But in reality, I agree with a lot of what you said. So,
yeah,
but I just wanted to win. So, but no, that was really good. That was really good.
Any closing thoughts, Jackie?
Yeah,
Enjoyed that.
I agree. I mean, it in the abstract, like, you know, a lot of the stuff works, but then we also have to remember like I'm hungry right now. I need to make sure that I have $5, $10, whatever dollars, so that I can go to the store and get, like that's the reality of where we are. And doesn't mean that we shouldn't be fighting for something different. It just means that we have to do both at the same time.
That's all I was trying to say. That's what I was trying to say. But, yeah.
Well, audience, we hope that this debate was provocative and interesting for you and helped you think through what your own values are, because that is part of the point too, that we are all living values-driven and purpose-driven lives where we enjoy the life that we live currently and don't do too much bad after we leave.
Don't do too much bad.
That's it. Unless you
I'm
plan
sure.
intentionally to come back and hunt white people. If that's what you plan to do.
And is that,
That's my
and is that
plan.
bad? I mean,
That's my plan.
On
That
our
is my
next
plan.
episode, hunting black people hunting white people after we die.
You said hunt. I thought you said haunt. I was like, I can hunt them for sure.
No,
I don't
no,
know
no,
if I
my
can hunt them.
accent.
I have an aversion to blood. I don't know about that.
Well, I mean, so I would say haunt. Yes, black people. Should black people haunt white people in the afterlife?
I'm okay with that.
Right. I saw that reminded me of that movie Tales from the Hood. Did y'all see that?
Yes,
Oh, so long ago. Yeah, so long ago.
And the little enslaved Africans was hunting the white guy. They came back from the dead and they was
I need to
and they
see
was
it
getting
again.
on, bro. Yeah, I remember that.
I feel like I have a completely different appreciation for it now, so I gotta find that.
Yeah. And also, I want to say, if I'm going to lose a debate, I'm glad that I lost to a fellow HBCU, fellow AUC member.
There it is.
And it lets us know that the Atlanta University Center, Clark Spelman Morehouse, is producing amazing thought leaders, thought provokers.
Yes.
And there is a reason why Spelman College is still the number one HBCU.
The number one. Yes. Even in this capitalist framework. Those are the little,
which is also an institution that is built off of a capitalist framework.
Sure is.
Might I add.
Sure is. And it has continued that.
That still goes back to my point.
Let's continue that legacy. Listen, it's what we live in. It's the air we breathe, the dollars we spend. It's where we are. For better, for worse. Yeah.
Cool.
But I think that goes back to another quote that I heard earlier at the symposium, Chris Emden. The Black experience is the height of rigor, the height of intellectual and academic and lived experience rigor. So shout out to the AUC and all the other HBCUs.
Facts on facts. And I think that's actually Will Smith talks about that. At the end of his book, he talks about like the biggest when he talked about his dad and how hardcore his dad was, even to his deathbed. Like he was just this very stoic guy, but right before he died, he kind of asked the question like, did I do it right? Like, did I can I let go? Can all the people that I was supposed to take care of, did I do my job? You know what I'm saying? And Will was kind of like, one of the last things he said to his dad was, I got it from here. You know what I'm saying? Like you're good. And his dad just kind of let out a deep breath. And I think within a couple of days, he was dead. So people just want to know that whatever they did, it meant something. Whether you're Will Smith's dad, whether you're Bell Hooks, whether you're, Jackie Forbes Olawabi, you know what I'm saying? Like no matter who you are, you want to just know that you will be remembered, that your reason for being here. What's it called? Your reason being your raison d'etre or something?
Yeah. I can see it, but I'm like, what's the pronunciation?
I don't know how to pronounce it, but your reason being was not in vain. So
I need to interject this right quick because I remembered how this conversation, like that line, started during that panel, and it was because something came up about the work that she did with Cornell West. and them being, basically like peers or counterparts, but folks don't recognize bell hooks at the same level as Cornel West. It came up in terms of folks knowing like Booker T. Washington, W.E.B. Du Bois, but not Anna Julia Cooper for like the work that she was doing along those same lines at that same time, just her not being like a counterpart. And so the conversation shifted to what does it mean to be like a Black woman who just doesn't get that same sort of recognition. Like historically, right? Like we have all of these historical examples of like well-known Black men. And I mean, we don't even necessarily have to like racialize it. Like we can talk about like gender comparatively without like, we can have that conversation about like what it means. But, specifically to our context and, whatever. Yeah, so that's like how it came up, just in terms of like in comparison to Bell Hooks's male counterparts, she just didn't get that same sort of recognition.
Right.
And I wonder how much of that was at play when she looked back over her life and thought things over, just like looking at how people recognize like a Cornel West, but don't necessarily might say Cornel West in a sentence, but won't necessarily say Cornel West and Bell Hooks in the same way that we say Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois. There's not that trifecta of like adding Anna Julia Cooper into that. So
I guess I want to see how this word is pronounced. Raison d'etre. Can y'all hear that?
Yeah. Raison d'etre.
I guess I wonder though, like, to live a life with purpose doesn't mean that you have to have a legacy in your death. Like, does that necessarily mean that? Because I think when we go to the idea of like, you've lived your life to the fullest, are you thinking about what, like, living your death to the fullest as well in that sense? Like, does it mean that you have to have all of this, like all of this stuff? And I guess I think about that because in some ways I feel like there's a pressure to leave a legacy, and that can like, I think in one way, the pressure of leaving a legacy can make your present life more purposeful. And maybe that's the reason. But I'm thinking like the whole point of living life is to live it while you're alive, because you can't do anything when you're dead. Like if you aren't remembered, you won't know. If you are remembered, you won't know. So it's like, does that actually, I guess in one way, the function of thinking about your legacy is to have a more vibrant current life. Because if it doesn't do that, then it just makes you think about the after and you won't be there.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. Cause now I'm just trying to think of like, it's true. Like in my heart, it would feel bad to be forgotten in a way, but then I won't know. And then it's like, is that an unnecessary kind of like emotional burden to carry now? Or like, is it a logical worry to like in the present, And I'm trying to think about like things my therapist might say too, or just therapists who might say something like, is this a like functioning worry? Like is it like a reasonable worry to have in the present? It's just like it's not even technically reasonable to worry about tomorrow. So then why would I worry about, it's like tomorrow when I hope I'm here, than the tomorrow when I know I'm not going to be here. So why worry about that? I don't know. I'm just trying to think, because it's like, if I can just like live the happiest that I can now, then yeah, sure, there'll be a point where I might be remembered, especially if I have children. But then there's always going to come a point where your name disappears. That whole phrase of that thing that people say, like there's the day your name is first said, and then there's going to be a day that your name is said for the last time. And is that such a bad thing? Like, there's going to be more people in the world. I don't know. And then I think too, just practically speaking about the about the names that will be remembered now in this social media era, in this like quick fame era. Like there's so many people who are doing stuff, and what people care about is different. Like I don't know, like, it seems like there'll be names that we will remember forever, or we would hope to, but like now it's just I feel like what's popular is just so distributed and scattered that it's not going to be the same as even 30, 40 years ago, when certain people could only be remembered because of their infamy in some way. But now it's just like, it's just so many people to be remembered. And so then there might be pockets of people who might remember a certain person, but I don't know if it's even like in this generation, it's already like an overload of information. So what does it mean to be a celebrity at this time? Because it's like, I can't imagine the kids who are growing up now, and it's just like there's so many just micro celebrities. It's just a lot. It's just a whole lot. And so who's going to rise to the top to be remembered? I don't know if it matters, or it depends on the subgroup. I was just talking with my boyfriend yesterday about that. Like, it's so like the internet, I feel like, has revealed how different people really are, and how many, minuscule subgroups there are across the world. Like there's so many people who are just like, they're interested in that super deep, and then you have all the celebrities who are known within that very thin like group of people, and then that's just like times a million. So I don't it just makes me wonder, like, does it matter?
That's a good, everything you said, especially in the beginning, was everything my therapist would say. Like there's just things, and that's what she's been trying to get through my head for the past 2 years, is like, John, there's just things in life you can't control.
Yeah.
Like whether you're remembered or not is just not in your control. That's just there's no amount of work that you could have done and be this impactful to be. And then there are other people who haven't done as much work that are remembered, that are still remembered, So you got somebody, I was just thinking about Tupac, right? And to us, our generation, Tupac is everything. We gonna remember Tupac, because of everything that happened. But you ask a kid who was born in 2008, 2005, do they know who Tupac is? Some might, depending on their parents, but then others might be like, who? You know what I'm saying? And to us, that's blasphemy. You got Jesus, Michael Jackson, Tupac. You know what I'm saying? Like, how can you not? But no matter how great his impact was, celebrity, social justice, revolution, Black, all of that, movie star. In 50 years, his name might just die with our generation. We don't know. You know what I'm saying? So the extent to what, like you said, the extent to one's infamy is not in our control. You know what I'm saying? All we can do is do everything that we can now, live the life that we can. And like you were talking about, Jackie, like Zora Neale Hurston was probably like a Tupac of her generation. You know what I'm saying? In terms of her writing and everything she did. But when she died, she didn't know that she would or wouldn't be remembered, and then had no idea Alice Walker would come back and, you know what I'm saying? Like, give her a rebirth. So nobody knows how and she still don't know that she did. You know what I'm saying? So, like you were saying, Amber, I think that's a really good point. It's like, is this probably an unnecessary emotional burden? I like how you said that we're carrying, and I would lean towards maybe so, because there's nothing you can do about it if you're gonna be remembered or not. That's up to God and the kids coming after us.
What do you think, Jackie? Yeah.
I mean, I think I understand like the concern, and I think and maybe it's not even concern, it's just like the fear. But all of that is related or connected to the like the pursuit of immortality. Like for generations, people have wanted to like cheat death.
That's true.
And we hear about like, Michael Jackson and his like crypto tanks or whatever, whatever they were, like all of these sorts of things that we do to preserve our like youth, preserve our physical bodies, preserve our like life. because people don't want to face death for whatever reason. But even if you've made peace and accepted the reality of physical death, the pursuit of immortality is like beyond the physical. You know, it's the metaphysical. And so I think people might be feeling like, whether that's consciously or subconsciously, that even if my physical body goes, then my metaphysical can continue to exist in perpetuity. But that existence is completely irrelevant if nobody acknowledges it. And so in some ways, like, those sorts of like emotional wounds are deeper than physical, and those might even go back to, like, you know, the childhood, right? You know, like sticks and stones may break our bones, but, like, you know, we know that that's not necessarily true. There was a panelist yesterday who, you know, is at least 30s, maybe even 40s, who shared a story about something that he remembers, like a playmate saying to him when he was 5. And he said, I will never forget the exact words that just have stayed with me and kind of like haunted me. And in lots of ways, I've tried to like overcome them, in the sense of like, everything that I do, maybe not everything, that might be dramatic, but like, you know, a lot of the things that I do have been trying to prove what that person said wrong. And it was something to the effect of like, you can't do anything right. And so a lot of what he's done has been to, you know, kind of prove that I can do things right. And so I bring that up because, you know, these sorts of like emotional wounds, you know, for many of us, like throughout our lives, we try to do things to like prove them wrong, to heal them. But I think one of the scariest like realities to grapple with is that in death, you cannot do those things in the same way.
Right.
Yeah, not at all.
I'm happy. This was good. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I'm excited. Yeah. Everybody good?
We good.
It's been another episode, y'all. Street Academy Podcast, where we get 1 foot in the academy and 1 foot in the streets. And 1 foot in the streets. And we are out. Peace. That was fun.
I liked it.
That was good. I liked it. That was good.
You're still recording, John.
That you know got their feet upon the neck of the haters, the game and the devil like came in.